Yes, hello folks, welcome to the Global Football Show. I'm your host as always, Phil Brown, joined with my regular fantastic co-host, the actor Zach Louie. Apologies to our listeners, this has been somewhat inconsistent the days we get this podcast out. That's primarily my fault. But we will get back to doing this every Monday and we will be doing this live. So stick with us, we appreciate that. First of all, Zachy, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well, Phil. Great to be back on co-hosting the Global Football Show. Got a ton to discuss today, so very excited.
Yes, we do, my friend. I want to talk to you about Barcelona because as we were getting ready to hit record, I was reading a lot about what was going on. I know you were covering it on your website, BTL, and I was going through some of the allegations on this, and they're truly staggering. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Antonio Conte, of course, because Antonio Conte had a wonderful report to Richardson this morning, which I found quite amusing. I will talk a little bit about the PSG experiment and whether that's coming to an end. Of course, we've got the result against Bayern Munich, which was not great. The Ashraf Hakimi situation and even the Nasser Khalifa situation, which is truly bizarre. Zach, let's start with Barcelona because it is quite interesting because this is actually a criminal case that's being brought against them rather than a sporting one. There's very similar aspects of this to what happened with Calciopoli and Juventus, of course, influencing referees, bribing referees, being relegated. But La Liga have said that there's no potential for sporting punishment because this exceeds your statute of limitations. This happened beyond 5 years ago. This happened 5 years ago. They can only go back 3 years. UEFA still have jurisdiction there. They could still do something. But most of this is being pursued by the Spanish government. I'll just give a quick summary. So they're being charged with corruption over payments made to Vice President of Spanish Football Refereeing Committee, and the case is being brought by Spanish Prosecutor's Office. Bartomeu and Rosell are facing charges. Barca are explaining that they had an external consultant who provided reports related to professional refereeing. This is how they're explaining it. The payments were made to a company called Dasnell 95, a company owned by Negreira, between 2001 2018. What's really interesting is in a deposition to Spanish tax authorities, Negreira, the individual that owns this company, said the payments were to make sure that no refereeing decisions were given against Barcelona. That's pretty damning.
hmm Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest stories in world football at the moment. And it's a story that I think is only going to grow. It's a story that is already so complex and so thorough that I haven't fully gotten to the bottom of it. In fact, for my other podcast on Bet Central, Zach Lowy's European football show that I recently started, I will be having two La Liga experts in Colin Miller and Ewan McTeer to discuss this as well as the rest of La Liga action. So definitely check that out. But yeah, with regards to this scandal, I think that it's something that it really just sends shivers through your spine when you look at the language that's being used, when you look at all of the stuff that's happened, because it felt like we were talking about this just a few months ago with regards to Barcelona. Not this particular scandal, but their economic difficulties and just all of the damning reports and thinking, man, how low can this club sink? And now we get to the point where this really blows out anything that we've seen about Barcelona. It blows it out of the water because we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
uh, a Spanish prosecutor has filed the charges that Barcelona have been actively corrupt in sport, which is it's something that strikes a chord through the vein of what we think is justice and fairness in sport. So yeah, it seems that from the prosecutor's report, it seems that Barcelona paid over 7.3 million euros to the company of Jose Maria Enriquez Negreira, who was a former referee and who was the ex-vice president of the refereeing committee of Spanish football between 1994 and 2018. and it is alleged that these payments took place between 2001 and 2018, which is of course when Negreira left his position. Negreira was allegedly paid for providing the club with uh, with advice on referees. That's at least the club's position. They're essentially stating that it was more as a an advisor. The company Dasnil 95, this company that kind of looks like it was just set up as a way to circumvent taxes, which of course we know in Spanish football, taxes. There are plenty of players and teams that have come under fire with this from the tax authorities. But this investigation actually began after Spain's tax authorities identified irregularities with regards to the tax payments that were carried out by Dasnil 95, this company that was created by Negreira. So it seems that Barcelona were paying an extreme amount of money towards to Negreira's company for in exchange for favorable actions, whether that's decision making in games, positive decisions that benefit Barcelona, as well as the hiring of referees. You know, referees who perhaps were favorable towards Barcelona. And yeah, when you look at the Calciopoli scandal, there's a fantastic documentary on Calciopoli on Netflix called Bad Sport. I forgot what it was. Bad Sport is the Netflix series.
Yeah, it's good. Brilliant show. That it's really good, actually.
I definitely recommend anybody who's listening to check it out. And I saw that a few months ago, and so reading the reports and hearing that, you know, I definitely notice a lot of similarities between this, and I think that it's clear that this is a damaging scandal. But it remains to be seen what happens with regards to the punishment. There's obviously a lot of speculation. Marca recently reporting today that Barcelona could be excluded from European competition altogether due to damage to the competition's reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a look actually at the UEFA statute that Marca were referencing in the article, and it goes to the basically talking about clubs that enter European competition must not have directly and or indirectly been involved in any activity aimed at arranging or influencing the outcome of a match at national or international level. So you know, you read that report. That's directly from the language of the UEFA statute. It seems very much that if these allegations are proven correct, then they could seriously face an immediate, a danger of being excluded. So right now, it seems that Barcelona, there's no immediate danger because the governing bodies of the Spanish, European, and world football have 5 year statute of limitations. That's what the La Liga president Javier Tebas stated. However, UEFA and La Liga, they are two separate bodies, of course.
Yes.
And if UEFA believes that Barcelona's scandal, even if it's going to take until 2024 or whatever for the courts to reach a verdict, the footballing authorities in Nyon can decide that this scandal has cast such a shadow, has drawn so much scrutiny to the club that having Barcelona compete in the Champions League, which is all but certain that they are going to qualify for the Champions League, not the Europa League or the Europa Conference League, they could decide that that having them participate would be kind of a slap in the face to their regulations. It would draw reputational damage, and it would tarnish their image. So they could take a decision without waiting for for the Spanish courts to reach a verdict, and they could exclude them. So I fully expect this one to continue to grow, continue to build steam, and yeah, it's something that if the allegations are proven correct, then 100% Barcelona need to face some serious consequences.
Well, let's even look at the sporting consequences before we look at the legal consequences. Let's say Barcelona were excluded from the Champions League or something like that. The very fact that they didn't qualify for the knockout stages of the Champions League has already had a major impact on them financially and what they can do this summer. This is a football club hanging by a financial thread. If they got banned from Europe for, say, a couple of years or whatever, a year or two, what would be the ramifications for Barcelona as a football club? And how would they survive that financially? Because they're not in a situation where they could easily write that out. I mean, we're talking about major, major consequences here for Barcelona that extend beyond the punishment. I mean, the financial ramifications here could be enormous.
Yeah, 100%. I think that um, neutrals will naturally feel skeptical because just a few months ago, it seemed like Barcelona were up against a wall financially, and yet they go out and spend 60 million on Ferran Torres. A few months later, they go out and sign Robert Lewandowski, Jules Koundé, Frank Kessié, Andreas Christensen, all these quality players, and you just think they're Teflon, right? They can skate
Mm.
away from everything. They can just pull out a lever and boom, yeah, está. But I do think that European football, the revenue, of course, as well as the attraction that it brings. Obviously, Barcelona are one of the biggest clubs in the world. I think that most players would want to play at the Camp Nou, but European football or lack of European football is definitely a deciding factor for a lot of players. So that's going to have massive repercussions on them, not just their ability to offer money for these players, but to attract the players as well and get them to sign on the dotted line. And and there's also another interesting report that we haven't mentioned, but I think it bears mentioning, and that's with regards to Gavi. So in
Mm-hmm.
addition to Barcelona's massive transfer splurge last summer, there were also quite a few contract renewals, and one of them was Gavi, the Golden Boy, the a player who has had a meteoric rise in Barcelona and has become a vital player for them. But yeah, in the end of January, Barcelona won a court ruling to register them as a first team player. They were previously unable to do so after reaching the limit of financial fair play. Javier Tebas, the La Liga president, has stated that he wants to appeal this verdict, and yeah, following through. And so it seems like this is going to go to court. So if Barcelona are unsuccessful in defending this appeal, if Tebas and his side win out this case, then Gavi could be forced to leave Barcelona as a free agent, and that's something that, while it doesn't relate to the
Oh,
Negreira
that's
case,
incredible.
it is something. It is just another scandal that is kind of that has really tarnished Barcelona, and I think that obviously a lot of people have been waiting on Barcelona's downfall. They've been kind of envious and jealous of their success. They want something to happen to them, but I think that it has to be said that these allegations are truly shocking. It just seems like controversy is following the club everywhere. And
Yes.
of
Sorry, go
course,
ahead.
just one thing, and of course, whenever you're dealing with kind of stuff, you're going to get Barcelona fans who essentially put their heads in the sand,
Of
who say,
course.
no, whatever you say, you're just trying to tarnish the club. So I think that there has to be a fine balance, okay? There is an ongoing investigation right now. The Spanish prosecutor has charged the club with corruption. these are not just some baseless rumors, okay? This is something that is incredibly serious and that Barcelona are going to have to deal with.
I do feel sorry for the Barcelona fans in some way because none of this is their fault. But I want to ask you about Tebas because he's been quite he's been quite strict on FFP and quite critical of Barcelona. In fact, he also said that they would not be allowed to spend the summer. And I get the feeling that other leagues may not be as strict with their oversight on FFP and may not even have that desire. I would imagine a successful Barcelona is very, very important to the commercial value of La Liga, to their television rights. It's important for other football clubs and how much that television, how much their television rights is worth. I would imagine, let's just take a worst case scenario, a relegated Barcelona would be devastating, not just to Barcelona, but to the value of television deals, La Liga in general, and of course, what other clubs would receive as a result of that. So it's definitely in their interest to have a strong and healthy Barcelona. You know, El Clasico is probably the biggest football game in the world, or certainly one of them. One of the most watched football games in the world. It's very, very important to the attraction of Spanish football. And yet, he has quite rightly pointed the finger at Manchester City and PSG for their flagrant FFP, alleged flagrant FFP violations, domestically and otherwise, and rightfully expects firm punishment for those. But when you look at some of the weak punishment that's been applied in the past, watered down punishments, fines, what have you, why is Tebas being so aggressive on this?
It's a really interesting one with Tebas and Barcelona. I think that he's somebody who has kind of taken extremes with pro and anti Barcelona on several levels. It's clear that he wants Barcelona to get their financial affairs in order, and that comes with discipline, disciplining the club, forcing them to suffer repercussions. It's clear that he tried to, draw a fine line with that. With that being said, I think he recognizes that Barcelona are obviously a massive boon to them financially, and that them having a decline would spell bad news for the club, because it would essentially mean it spell bad news for the league, because it would essentially mean that Real Madrid have the potential to monopolize La Liga and essentially convert it into another Bundesliga with Bayern winning it, or Ligue 1 with Paris Saint-Germain winning it every year. So I think he recognizes the potential that for that to happen, and that would certainly drag La Liga down in terms of their attraction. But yeah, I think that Tebas, I don't think he's necessarily clean either. I know that there was a recent report that stated that he attempted to bribe someone in the Spanish Federation to push out the current president of the Spanish Federation, Luis Rubiales, and put one of his own men, Albert Soler, as the president of the Spanish Federation. And Soler, interestingly, served quite a few years on Josep Maria Bartomeu's board as FC Barcelona president. So, I think that Tebas,
he's been accused of being a Real Madrid fan, hasn't he, too, Zach?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so, and I think that also. I mean, you have to also take into account. There's just so much happening with Spanish football, so much on so many different levels. We haven't even mentioned the CBC, right? With regards to the kind of selling off a percentage of La Liga's revenue to CBC for short-term gain. But yeah, it seems like La Liga, there are also reports from that same outlet that I just mentioned, El Español, that La Liga, they're facing potential severe economic consequences because two of their main sponsors, Dazin and CBC, are trying to break their contracts with Javier Tebas. So Tebas has a lot going on right now, of course, but Yeah, it seems like right now Barcelona are really paddling up Schitt's Creek, if you want to use that expression. But of course, last winter they were looking at signing several players. They didn't sign anybody. Of course, they let go of Memphis Depay. Um, but yeah, from what Tebas has stated, basically saying that the reason Barcelona didn't sign anybody in January because of La Liga, being that financial watchdog, not letting them, and he's continuing to state that Barcelona are not going to be able to sign players this coming summer. So of course, Barcelona fans are going to feel like Tebas is out to get them, but yeah, I think that it's clear that both La Liga and Barcelona are facing some severe economic troubles, and will be interesting to see how they get themselves out, because as much as they may hate each other, La Liga and Barcelona and Javier Tebas, they are two they are kind of mutually dependent on
Yeah,
one
they
another.
need each other.
Barcelona need La Liga, and La Liga need Barcelona. So they've just got to work something out.
But then this brings me to my other question. I got two more questions on this, and we'll move on. And that is, what's the incentive for UEFA to thoroughly punish Barcelona? Because in some sense they're in the same situation. They need Barcelona for the revenue in the Champions League, for television rights, especially at a time when they're under pressure from European Super Leagues. I mean, you had a ruling here last week that kind of flew under the radar, but it's actually quite huge, and it's an antitrust ruling that Relevant Sports won against the MLS about or US Soccer about where they can host games and whether they can play them outside of the country. A lot of these governing bodies are losing their ability to govern because people are now starting to challenge antitrust laws. People are now starting to challenge their monopoly. UEFA's under pressure at the moment to provide more revenue, more exciting games. I mean, one of the things that I heard quite a bit when United played Barcelona was, wouldn't it be great if it was like this all the time, where we had these games on a regular basis, where New Camp was full, Old Trafford was full, it was great entertainment, it was, and you could just see where people were looking at that going, do we really want to be playing, Nantes, or do we want to be playing these types of games on a regular basis? Because are your UEFA really incentivized to show teeth in this?
I think so. I think that if you're um, any organization with disciplinary authority, you cannot give the image that you are weak, that you're going to let malfeasance, run
Mm-hmm.
without any discipline. And it's clear that UEFA have been accused of being weak in the past, specifically with financial fair play, and I think in terms of double standards, right? You have one standard for a team like Everton, another standard for a team like Paris Saint-Germain, So I think that there's definitely the incentive for UEFA to clean up their act. It's I think that maybe they haven't gotten as much scrutiny as FIFA, but I think it's clear that there's a lot of accusations that UEFA are perhaps not as clean. That they're going to allow the super clubs to run their thing, and I think that as well. You have to have in the back of your mind the European Super League. I think that there's still a possibility that that's going to happen in the future, even if it was shot down immediately in 2021. So I think that is perhaps in the back of their minds, UEFA, knowing that, kind of having to deal with it from two angles. If we punish Barcelona too much, as well as other clubs such as Juventus,
Mm-hmm.
another remaining member of the European Super League, then they're thinking that if we punish them too much, maybe they're going to decide, what, let's try to give this European Super League another shot. Let's revamp it, basically try to break away from UEFA. On the other hand, they're also thinking that if we allow Barcelona and these other clubs to get away scot free, then maybe there's going to be clubs who realize that they can get away with it, and there's going to be that general image that essentially,
Yeah, it's
uh,
precedent.
Barcelona like are holding a gun to UEFA's head, and saying that if if you go try to discipline us, we're gonna leave you guys and start a breakaway competition, right?
Yeah.
So I think that UEFA, they need to find a healthy balance. I do think that that's something that's going to be in the back of their head, though. As I mentioned, the reports that UEFA could exclude Barcelona from European competition. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think that one reason why is because it would certainly create a, a massive decline for Barcelona. Probably induce a fire sale of several key players,
Hmm.
potentially forcing Gavi to leave as well as other players. And I think that I think that it would also potentially incentivize them to try to start the European Super League again, because they would be in
Yeah.
need of short-term cash, right? But I think that to another degree, um, Barcelona and UEFA are also sort of mutually dependent on one another.
Yes, exactly.
UEFA's growth is it also coincides with Barcelona's growth. So I think that it's a difficult position for a lot of these people to be in. But yeah, it's clear that Barcelona, there's definitely some there's definitely some reports that they have broken the law, that they have really tampered with uh, all things fair and just in the sporting world. And 100%, I think that if these allegations are proven correct, then yeah, this has to be considered the biggest sporting scandal of this decade so far.
Well, just the last point on this before we move on. Because allegedly these charges go back to 2001. So I would implicate Laporta, Rossell, Bartomeu. Rossell, of course, um, we all know about his past, of course, with Nike and other allegations, other charges against him. So clearly it was a culture of corruption there. But then that brings me to my other question, because people like Valverde, who were at the club at the time, people like Guardiola, the Athletic reported sources close to Guardiola denied any knowledge of this happening. Valverde allegedly said the same. Is that realistic to believe that the managers weren't aware? Let's take the charges at face value and say that if they're true, would it be reasonable to assume that the managers didn't know this was happening?
I think that I think that there's always a chance that they knew it was happening. But with that being said, I don't think that we can rush to conclusions.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I
it's
don't
just
think
yeah,
that,
it's
for
speculation.
me, from what I've read of this scandal, I think that it seems like it was more something involved with the higher ups, and I do think that um, it's rare that you'd have a manager of a club, especially a club like Barcelona, where managers don't always last that long. Um, I think that would be fairly rare and somewhat bizarre for them to have knowledge of these illicit payments going through. And really, however you look at this, it's just hard to find a defense for Barcelona. I think it's clear, it's pretty much a fact that Barcelona did pay 7.3 million euros to this company that was created by Negreira, and it seems for the sole purpose of receiving payments uh, to evade taxes. And I think that that is at the genesis of it. As I mentioned, the tax authorities are the one that alerted them to this possibility, and really kickstarted the investigation. But it seems that Barcelona's defense is that this company was just used as like advisors for referees, whatever the hell that means. The prosecuting team is stating that Barcelona this was kind of a quid pro quo. We're going to pay you guys 7.3 million euros over the course of 17 years for favorable refereeing decisions in the midst of games, as well as hiring referees that would be favorable to Barcelona.
Yeah.
And I think that, frankly, um, that right now, uh, Barcelona they are the ones that have to make the convincing case that no, this was completely clean. I think that the prosecutors have to have the benefit of the doubt, because you just look at the details of the story, it does not paint Barcelona in an attractive light. So yeah, I think that it's a massive story, and I expect it to continue to gain steam over the coming months.
Yeah, that deposition was quite damning from Negreira. Let's shift the conversation to PSG. We've covered them before in the podcast, but they must be covered again. It seems like the wind has been taken out of their sails, the PSG project. Lots of controversy surrounding the football club with Nasser Al Khalifa, of course, who he himself, as of course, was re-elected to the UEFA Executive Committee as the head of the ECA, European Club Association. So perhaps he's not the most greatest example of calibrated moral compass at UEFA, but nonetheless, we'll talk about the football first. The Messi project didn't work. The Neymar project didn't work. Mbappe has been given the keys to the city to stay, and he must be asking himself, you know, are the owners committed? Because there's talks of they have to reduce the wage bill this summer. There's not going to be major spending, and whether the same commitment is there. Do they still believe that they can achieve their objectives at PSG by winning European Cups? Because you might disagree with me on this, but they were close a couple of years ago, maybe a year or two ago, winning this, but it didn't look close to me this season, and they've had a poor domestic season as well. I remember Kimpembe, having to go talk to the fans and trying to, stem their anger. This is not how this was supposed to go at this stage of their ownership. Do you think it's time for Mbappe and Messi to leave?
Oof, that's a tricky one. I think that it's time for Lionel Messi to leave, because right now I think that um, this experiment at Paris Saint Germain, it hasn't gone well for him. I'm not sure where he'd go, if he'd go to MLS at this point. Would he go to another European club? But I think that it's probably time for him, for both of them to part ways with one another. But yeah, I think you look at the whole Paris Saint Germain experiment. The first few years of the club, I think, doing okay in the European front, kind of gradually building, becoming a Ligue 1 dynasty, right? And then we get to 2017, and it seemed they beat Barcelona 4-0. It seems like Paris Saint Germain fans, they're having a revelation. Oh, this is where our European dominance finally starts. We have finally
Mm-hmm.
beaten a top class European opposition. We are going to take that leap now. And of course, what happens next? They end up losing 6-1 to Barcelona, get knocked out in the round of 16, um, and they decide that they're going to break transfer records, and sign two of the best players in world football in Neymar and Kylian Mbappe. And from that point on, I think that for sure the Paris Saint Germain, the fabric of the club, as well as their intentions, it definitely changed. They became far more of a superstar club. You look at um, their teams before. They had some phenomenal players like Thiago Motta, Javier Pastore, Edinson Cavani, but they didn't have the cream of the crop, right? The very best of the best. And from that point on in 2017, that's when it starts to change. So yeah, 2017-18. They lose to Real Madrid in the round of 16. And 2018-19, they go out early again. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that they were knocked out by maybe was it Real Madrid again? I'm trying to think, but
2018, I can't remember.
but as you mentioned, Phil, um, that I think that the standards definitely changed from that point when they signed Neymar and Mbappe and well, yeah, with regards to 2018-19, obviously it was Manchester United.
Oh
And
my god, how could I not remember
how
that?
did you not? That's
Mm.
completely, you should be
You
ashamed.
hung me out the dry. I was like, I'll
And
never let that
once
one down.
again, I think more damning the fact that it was a Manchester United team that was, being managed by, I think, an interim coach at that point.
Solskjaer was the manager when they
Solskjaer.
knocked him
I
out.
believe he was still the interim at that point. And obviously, they should not be losing to that United team. But more importantly, they should not be going out in the round of 16. Okay? Because what that does is, when you go out in the round of 16, even if it's to a club like Bayern or Manchester United, you are essentially like stating that you are not one of the best teams in Europe. Even if you win the league, you are from anywhere from 9 to 16, and that's just not where Paris Saint-Germain can be. It's embarrassing for them. So yeah, the following year they go out and win a treble under Thomas Tuchel, but once again just unable to get the job done. Of course, they lost to Bayern Munich in the Champions League final, and I think that it's so ironic that with all of that spending that they did, the player when they finally got to the biggest match in club football, the player who scored against them to win it was a player who they let go for free, who had come through their academy.
Mm.
In fact, pretty interesting stat for you is that Paris Saint Germain, dating back to that Champions League final between PSG and Bayern, they've played Bayern quite a few times, and it's made for some interesting matchups. But actually, the majority of goals that have come against them, I believe 5 out of 7 goals that Bayern have scored in that time have been scored by players who left Paris Saint-Germain for free. Kingsley
Oh, it's
Coman
incredible stat
and
that.
Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting.
Choupo-Moting, yeah.
So yeah, as you mentioned, Phil, they came fairly close to getting the job done in Europe. The following year, they made it all the way to the semifinals, lost to Manchester City. And so at that point, you're thinking if you're Paris Saint-Germain, okay, well we need a big European result. We need to convince Kylian Mbappe to stay. We need to finally get over the hump. And that's where we see uh, perhaps one of the most blockbuster spending sprees of all time with Lionel Messi, Achraf Hakimi, Gianluigi Donnarumma, so many quality players. Ironically, a lot of them coming in on free transfers, once again failed. They had a massive lead against Real Madrid. They blew it once again, losing in the round of 16. Okay, and then this time around they lose in the round of 16 to Bayern. And I think that yeah, for sure, I think that you compare their various round of 16 defeats, whether that's to Real Madrid in 2018, Manchester United the following year, or the past 2 years. I think that this one is by far the most embarrassing. I think that um, the fact is Bayern were the much better team in the first leg. PSG really did not look that competent until Kylian Mbappe came on and created quite a few opportunities. But yeah, Bayern going into the second leg with a 1-0 victory thanks to Coman's goal. And yeah, the second leg, I have to say, I was expecting a much more disciplined performance from PSG. I thought that Neymar's injury was going to allow them to be more balanced, but this was a horrific performance from them. They
Yeah.
never looked anywhere close to beating Bayern and never looked anywhere close. And I'm just thinking, do these guys know that they have to attack the lead? That it's not that they're not defending the lead; they've got to attack the lead.
There's something there though, Zach. Because if you
Yeah.
think about this, right?
Hmm.
There's a couple of things I want to say on this. First of all, state ownership is not a guarantee of dominance, right? As Manchester City and PSG will tell you. But you said a couple of things that made me think about the fact that that stat about how many players they've let go for free that have scored against them. And you were mentioning about this massive spending spree and the cream of the crop, and if I looked at a lot of the ways they've gone out of the Champions League, it's been very similar. Right, when they went out to United, they threw an unbelievable lead away that they never should have went out. Right, when they went out to Barcelona, they threw an unbelievable lead away and never should have went out. When they went out to Real Madrid, they threw a lead away and never should have went out. And it makes me question, when you buy players at massively inflated prices and massively inflated wages, how much do they really fight for the shirt? What is the incentive for being at your football club? Is it money? Is it where, you know what? If you look at the Bayern Munich team that beat them, none of the players in that Bayern Munich team are beyond PSG's financial reach.
Right.
But they identify with the club completely different. They've got a smattering of, quality players, not Galacticos. I mean, Sadio Mane's not a Galactico. He was, Lewandowski goes. They've got the Matthias de Ligt, of course, very, very good player. But PSG well within its reach. You look at Joshua Kimmich, players like that are Bayern born and bred, that will fight to the death for your team. Eric Choupo-Moting, they've got a mixture of players that will give you everything, that aren't there for financial reasons, that are there because they identify with the sporting project or whatever. And it's also not a coincidence to me at Man City. I've never won it either. And I'm questioning, is there an issue with players identifying with, that are willing to I don't want to say die for the club, but are willing to give absolutely everything, where they go, you know what, win, lose, or draw here, I'm still getting 400 grand a week and no one's getting rid of me if you're Kylian Mbappe.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what. PSG, they've spent a tremendous amount of money. Obviously, a lot of their signings have been on free transfers, but you have to factor in wages, signing on fees.
Sure.
Well, yeah, you mentioned a great point. Bayern, on the other hand, they have actually done. They have kind of reined in their spending somewhat. I think that you look at last summer, they didn't really sign a replacement for Robert Lewandowski. They brought in Sadio Mane, who's kind of a false nine role. They brought in Matthias Tell, who's more of a project, just 17 years of age.
Okay.
So apart from splurging on Matthias de Ligt to replace Niklas Süle, they have been very much operating, I think, shrewdly at a financial level. We're all, and yet you compare their January business, Bayern bringing in Jan Sommer, a very good goalkeeper despite his error against Paris Saint-Germain. A player who's a proven Bundesliga goalkeeper. They needed him after Manuel Neuer's injury, so they brought him in. They brought in Joao Cancelo, who, despite the fact that he hasn't been a regular at Bayern, still a quality player. Did very well for Bayern's final goal to find Serge Gnabry up the pitch. So with all the contrasts in finances, I think that you also have to point that out. Paris Saint Germain did not they did not sign a single player in January. And I have to tell you, I am a big fan of Luis Campos. I think that he's done a very good job as a sporting director, and of course, engineered the two teams in the past decade. The only two teams that have managed to beat Paris Saint Germain to the title in Monaco and Lille. And so I was very positive when Campos was appointed as sporting director. I thought it was going to be a nice marriage between him and Galtier, as we saw at Lille. And they brought in some midfielders like Renato Sanchez, Fabian Ruiz, and Vitinha and Carlos Soler. But with that being said, I feel like they still are missing that physical, energetic midfield enforcer in the center of the pitch. And I'll tell you what, I think that Paris Saint Germain have not been the same since Thiago Motta and Blaise Matuidi left. I
Oh,
think that Marco Verratti, as good as he was also so good because of his partnership with those two players. When you take them out, and he's not the same. And frankly, they haven't been able to replace those two. So I think that's been still a massive concern. That has really been one of their Achilles heels, Paris Saint Germain. And ironically, the best midfielder at PSG, arguably the best midfielder in Ligue 1 as well, Marco Verratti, he was probably Paris Saint Germain's worst player on the pitch. You can't scapegoat him, obviously, because this was a Paris Saint Germain team that did not show up. But I have to wonder, Verratti. Everybody talks about Neymar, his off the field issues. Verratti with his smoking and his constant injuries. You wonder if that's taken a toll on him because he completely looked like a ghost. He gave the ball away for both goals. Just a few weeks ago, PSG were playing Lille, and he gave away possession for one goal and conceded a penalty for the other. So yeah, very disappointed with him. I'll tell you what though, I felt that two of the only players who showed up for Paris Saint Germain in this tie, apart from Nuno Mendes, who I felt had a very good first leg, not so good the second leg, but two of the only players who really showed up were Sergio Ramos and Danilo Pereira. And really, it's never a good sign when you have center backs or defensive midfielders as your best as your best players, because that means that you're typically trying to keep out attacks, and the players further forward are not doing their job. So yes, it was an incredibly disappointing performance from Mbappe and Messi playing up top in the absence of Neymar. They also didn't have that much in the way of service, and it looked completely disjointed. So there's a lot of stuff that we can point to, Phil. I think that Campos certainly has to take some culpability because PSG needed a center back in January, and of course that's been made all the more apparent with Presnel Kimpembe's season-ending injury. But they tried to sign a center back, they couldn't. Seems like Milan Skriniar will join them on a free transfer in the summer. But yeah, they I think that the lack of a center back was really damaging for them, and they brought in Nordi Mukiele in the 36th minute, who had joined in the summer for Marquinhos. Mukiele lasted until halftime before coming off for El Chadail Bichiabu, and who is, I believe, 17 years of age from the academy. So I think that was certainly a big issue. I also would say that I think that failing to sign a replacement for Angel Di Maria in the summer, they brought in a lot of midfielders. They didn't really bring in that winger who can change the games, and I think that really shows how underrated Di Maria is, as well as just a massive oversight. And they did a similar thing in January, allowing Pablo Sarabia, who was really their only genuine winger who could come off the bench for Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar and make an impact. They let him join Wolves. They didn't sign anybody. They tried to sign Hakim Ziyech, couldn't complete that deal in time. But some glaring errors from Campos and from the sporting management, and overall, despite the amount of money that's been spent, this is still a club with so many flaws. And I just wanted to point out, because we've talked a little bit about the contrast in spending between Bayern and Paris Saint-Germain, but you look at the substitutes that Christophe Galtier and Julian Nagelsmann brought on for the second leg. So, as I mentioned, they brought on Nordi Mukiele, as well as the 17-year-old El Chadail Bichiabu. They brought on Juan Bernat, the backup left back. They brought on Warren Zaire
I was
Emery.
going to get to him next because I want to ask you about him
Turned
because
it-
this
he
kid
just
may
turned-
be. It looks like they're starting to play young academy
Right,
players, which is and not making the mistake they made in the past. And this is a
right.
kid who's already made his Champions League debut,
They
who it
brought
seems
in
like,
they brought in Zaire Emery, who just turned 17
yeah,
this past week. They brought in Hugo Ekitike, a center forward who really hasn't been able to make the grade thus far. Bayern, on the other hand, brought on Joao Cancelo, Serge Gnabry, Leroy Sané, and Sadio Mane. So just
yeah,
acres of space between the two. I forgot to mention as well, they brought in Daley Blind in January. He was an unused substitute for this game. But I think that depth, I think that's something that Paris Saint-Germain certainly lack. And that's something that perhaps when you focus so much on signing superstars, perhaps you just lose focus on the fact that you need players who are going to come off against tired legs, who are going to make an impact, who are going to create some internal competition. But
there's
yeah,
also a
it's a very
consequence, Zaki, of
yeah,
giving Kylian Mbappe, an exorbitant amount of money and then not being
yeah,
able to spend it elsewhere on the squad. So
right.
this maybe actually see some of these young academy players getting a chance. I want to ask you quickly before we go
Just
about.
just one
Sorry,
last
sorry. Go
thing.
ahead, mate. Yeah.
I think one thing that I wanted to say with regards to Paris Saint-Germain, I think that one of the biggest issues with one of the most damning things about PSG, it's not necessarily the fact that they have been unable to win a Champions League so far. It's the fact that they've allowed so many players to leave from their academy, whether that's Moussa Diaby, Kingsley
Yeah.
Coman. I think that they are trying to do a better job of that with players like Bichiabu and Zaire Emery. But
Yeah.
I also think that another glaring issue is their failure to utilize Ligue 1 and monopolize their talent. That's something that Bayern have done a very good job of,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bringing in quality players from Bundesliga, weakening their rivals. You look at Paris Saint-Germain, uh, they have actually only signed um, three players from Ligue 1 clubs over the past 6 years. Kylian Mbappe from Monaco, as well as this past summer, Renato Sanchez and
Mm-hmm.
Hugo Ekitike. And, I think that Ligue 1, it gets a lot of unwarranted criticism. But I think that one thing that you have to give Ligue 1 a lot of credit for is it is a talent factory.
Oh,
Right?
unbelievable.
You look at the players who are coming from Ligue 1 to other leagues, they are doing a fantastic job. And the fact is, Paris Saint Germain have been unable to capitalize on that, whether that's bringing in players such as Seko Fofana on Lens, or bringing in, quality players from throughout these leagues that could instantly improve them. I think that Paris Saint Germain, perhaps there's, the upper management is saying, we can't be looking at players from Lens, Lorient, Nantes. We need to sign the cream of the crop. We're too good for them.
You'd
And
imagine
I
that's
think
what Luis
that's
Campos
been,
is going to do, though. Because that obviously, he
yeah.
came from another Ligue 1 club, so you'd imagine that's what Luis Campos will do.
You would imagine, but so far we have only seen Renato Sanchez, who of course worked with Galtier and
Lille.
Campos at Lille, as well as Hugo Ekitike, who hasn't really been able to make an impact. But I think that that's something that I would love Paris Saint Germain to do more of. I
Yeah.
think that it's clear that Campos wants to have more of a focus on French and Portuguese players.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that with Renato and Vitinha coming in. And I think that's great. I think that Paris Saint Germain, yeah, they just need to move away from this superstar model because it just causes so much drama and so much such uh, disjointed team
Yeah.
performances. And so yeah, I think that has to be a priority from Paris Saint Germain. They have to start utilizing the talent factory that is Ligue 1. They have to start giving genuine chances to these young players and yeah, I think that for the time being, they're just going to have to build their team around Kylian Mbappe. I think that the priority, if I was in charge of Paris Saint Germain, I'm allowing Messi to leave on a free transfer, and I'm doing everything I can to sell Neymar this summer.
Okay, finally, mate, let me ask you about Mr. Antonio Conte. I want to avoid national stereotypes, but Antonio Conte had the look of a man from a mob movie when he was talking about he delivered his riposte in an extremely cold, calculated manner that I must say I quite enjoyed. Richarlison coming out after the game yesterday, of course, 2 days ago after the game against Milan, being quite critical of the fact that he isn't being played. And Conte, of course, I thought dealt with that question and that criticism fantastically well by pointing out the fact that he's only scored 2 goals all season in the Champions League. He's been injured for most of the season. I thought one of the things that was quite funny was he made sure he mentioned he didn't win the World Cup. And Antonio Conte doesn't have the look of a man that's going to be at Tottenham next season, nonetheless. But very cold and very, it almost took a scalpel to Richarlison. What did you make of that?
Well, yeah, I know. As somebody who's fluent in Portuguese, I watched the Richarlison interview in full, and I was pretty taken aback because it's very rare that you hear someone speaking in such clear, defined terms, as well as targeting their manager. Just really stating that this season has been shit, and going to like specific instances of where Richarlison started or did well for one game, and then the next game he wasn't even in the match day squad, right? Or he wasn't he was an unused substitute. And it's like these are things that you'd normally hear a player coming to the coach directly, in a closed off meeting and saying, why are you doing this? So, and yet here is Richarlison going to Brazilian television, just stating, this is my coach. He goes from playing me to not playing me. He doesn't tell me why. And yeah, I think that it was the look of someone who was incredibly frustrated, and I would be too if I was Richarlison. I think that obviously he has been a flop so far, but what I will say is that I think that there was never really a plan lined up to incorporate Richarlison to get the most out of him. For me, it always seemed like Spurs were just trying to sign one of the best players in outside of the top six. They were trying to kind of take advantage of Everton's financial struggles, bringing in a quality player. But then what happens next? I always was skeptical of how they were going to incorporate him into a Conte team. And I think that, yeah, Richarlison, he's got to be feeling some form of regret. He's gone from scoring incredible goals in the World Cup to, yeah, still we are in March, just a few more games left in March before the international break. Richarlison still has not scored a Premier League goal. So that's just got to be something very tough to deal with as a player. Very tough to deal with.
To be fair to Richarlison, Son Heung-min didn't have the best run of form under
Right.
Conte either, and he's clearly an exceptional player. Sometimes players just don't fit a particular system. They're not bad players, but they just don't fit the way a certain manager plays. And I do think that's the case with Richarlison, because you saw him at the World Cup when he was used properly in Tite's squad. He was fantastic, but I just don't think he's suited to Spurs. And I think if they don't finish top four, I think they could lose Harry Kane this summer. Anything else before we go, buddy?
No, nothing else.
We will be back on Monday. We'll be live on Monday. So get involved, join us, get your comments in. We'll probably have a guest on Monday. We're working on that. We'll take a look at the results over the weekend. One of the things I want to ask you about on Monday was a young player you profiled on your website, which I'm very, very interested in, which is a young Victor Roque, a young Brazilian 17-year-old. So I want you to tell our audience what you think of him. He's a football manager legend already, so I'm looking forward to catching up with you Monday, mate, and we'll take a look at some of the news and headlines over the weekend, and we'll be back on Monday probably around 10 a.m. Pacific time, so that's going to be about 6 p.m. UK time, and around about 1 p.m. your time, Zaki. So look forward to having you then. Have a great weekend, my friend.
Thank you.
See ya.